Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in our series of Spider-Man Commander deck techs. Spider-Man has a huge number of legendary creatures in the set, so I wanted to showcase some of the coolest Commander options among them. I'm releasing a new Spider-Man Commander deck every Thursday through mid-November when the Avatar set drops, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. So if you have a request for a specific Spider-Man Commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you want to see me build them, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Dr. Octopus Master Planner. Dr. Otto Octavius was a brilliant research scientist who created a chest harness for 4 mechanical, tentacle-like arms to better perform experiments at a safe distance. An accident caused the arms to fuse to his body and drove him into a raving megalomania. He attempted to take control of the research facility, but Spider-Man showed up and eventually defeated him. Since then, the Doc has been one of Spider-Man's most famous and fun villains. I'm excited to show you what I put together for him, but before we get into the deck tech, let's take a look at my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. If I didn't think they were cool, I wouldn't have put them in the command zone. I'd rather have an interesting card than something that's just sort of a generic value piece. So whatever they want me to do, I'm going to put 30 cards toward doing that and trying to win with it. That's my game plan. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if the game plan would benefit from it, sometimes none, but I almost always keep to a base floor of 38 lands so I can make sure I hit my land drops so I can cast my spells and play the game. Let's take a look at our commander now. Dr. Octopus Master Planner is a 4/8 legendary human scientist villain for 5 a blue and a black, so pretty expensive. He has the abilities other villains you control get +2/+2, your maximum hand size is 8, and at the beginning of your end step, if you have fewer than 8 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. So with our commander in play, at the end of our turns, our hand is full and kind of overfull, and all of our villains get bigger. So what I like about Doc Ock is how classic he is as a villain. He makes grand speeches about his plans, his own superiority, the inevitability of his victory. He chews the scenery in ways that rival my favorite Magic antagonist, Nicol Bolas. Both of these characters are the essence of the bad guy in a Saturday morning cartoon, and even played straight, they walk the line between threatening and trifling, doubling down on their mania with every challenge they face. After Spider-Man beats him 3 times in a row, Doc Ock is afflicted with a rare moment of humility, admitting to himself that his foe might require more than he himself can bring to bear. He assembles the Sinister Six, a team of himself and 5 other rogues, and formulates a battle plan to bring Spider-Man to his knees. That's what the the bad doctor does. He schemes, he plots, and he inspires the worst of the worst to work together toward a common goal, being evil. And with him at the head of our deck, we can do that too. This is a Typal deck of the almost brand new villain creature type. As long as we put enough villains in our deck, Doc Ock keeps our hand full of them. Counting him and a couple of clones, we have a fully 30 creatures who are villains on the battlefield, as well as more than a few cards that boost or are boosted by our evildoers. Like a good leader, our commander also pumps up his teammates, who pull their own weight with conniving, evasion, card advantage, and a lot more. There are even shapeshifters who've joined our ignoble cause, and we have minions, that is tokens, to further do our bidding. We're not here to beat our opponents. We're here to crush them under the weight of our genius and our resolve. We are an unstoppable criminal syndicate, our hands tied by no laws and our plans impeded by no heroes. Nothing can stand in the way of our eventual triumph, least of all, some wall-crawling freak. When it comes to him, we aren't afraid to get our hands dirty, and while we could beat him one-handed, we have 6 separate limbs with which to crush him. But then, as with our sinister teammates, why stop at 6? You'll enjoy this deck if you like synergistic games with all your creatures working together, or if you feel like making multiple plays each turn from a hand that's always full is enough to justify your maniacal laughter. So as usual, you'll see the link to this Moxfield list in the video's description below. On that Moxfield page, beneath my deck list, you'll see a considering section full of cards that I thought about including and opted not to. Some of them are bigger than the budget I wanted to go for. Some of them are much less. So if your budget is higher or lower, this is a good place for you to start to get ideas on how to build your own version of Dr. Octopus. So we're going to start by talking about the core of our deck, our villains. As you see, we've got 27 villains listed here, and I mentioned we have a couple of clones and of course the Doctor himself to make 30. So we're going to start by talking about Lady Octopus Inspired Inventor. This isn't Olivia Octavius. This is, I think her name is Carol. Anyway, she's an existing character from before the Spider-Verse movies came out. And what a cool card. A single blue gets you a 0/2 legendary human scientist villain that says whenever you draw your first or second card each turn, put an ingenuity counter on Lady Octopus. So all you Joyra enjoyers are going to remember these ingenuity counters. They don't have an inherent meaning, but they are used in her next ability, which is we can tap her, and it says we may cast an artifact spell from our hand with mana value less than or equal to the number of ingenuity counters on Lady Octopus without paying its mana cost. So if we draw our first card on the turn during our draw step, Lady Octopus gets a counter. Whenever we draw our second card, maybe because we went to our end step and our commander had us draw up to 8, we put another counter on her. If we draw two cards at the same time, and they are both our first and second card, drawing cards always happens one at a time. It's just separate events when it comes to Magic's rules. So we would get 2 counters on Lady Octopus right away in the form of 2 triggers that would put the counter on her. We just don't get any cards for any cards don't get any counters for any cards we draw after the second card we draw each turn. But that is each turn. So if we end up with ways to draw cards on our opponent's turns, it will also put counters on Lady Octopus. And remember, this ability, it doesn't say activate only as a sorcery. So if we have a nice artifact in our hand, we can tap her anytime we want to just put that to cast that for free, as long as its mana value is less than or equal to the number of counters on Lady Octopus. And we have 19 artifacts in this deck. So next up is one of our changelings, Amoeboid Changeling, originally from Lorwyn? Yes, Lorwyn. 1 and a blue gets us a 1/1 shapeshifter with the Changeling ability. Changeling means this card is every creature type, which means it is a villain. That doesn't mean only on the battlefield. Otherwise it would say this creature is every creature type. But this card, when a card refers to itself as a card, it means that ability functions in every zone. So Amoeboid Changeling is always going to be a villain for us, and anything else we need it to be. It also has the abilities that we can tap it to make target creature gain all creature types until end of turn, or lose all creature types until end of turn. The big benefit of this in this deck is we do have a bunch of creatures that aren't inherently villains. So Amoeboid Changeling being on the battlefield gives us a way to turn a creature into a villain, which means they would, if they weren't already a villain, get the bonus from our commander. So this is just tap Amoeboid Changeling and give that creature +2/+2, because that's what our commander gives it. But we also have a way to stymie our opponent's creatures. Maybe our opponents have a Typal deck of their own, or they're getting some kind of benefit from, their elves, let's say. We can make an elf no longer be an elf. It's just a creature without any creature types. There are definitely ways we can use the second ability aggressively, but it's really mostly in here for this first ability. Next up, we have Flying Octobot. 1 and a blue for a 1/1 flying artifact creature robot villain. So it is a villain, even though it is a robot. It says, whenever another villain we control enters, we put a 1/1 counter on this creature, but only once per turn. That is each turn, though, so if we are able to flash a villain in on our opponent's turns, it will still get the 1/1 counter. So this is a 2-mana 1/1 flyer that's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's worth recognizing that this is when a villain enters, not when a creature becomes a villain. So if we were to use Amoeboid Changeling to make a creature that's already on the battlefield into a villain, Flying Octobot won't trigger, because the creature that we've turned into a villain did not enter the battlefield, it just got a new job. Next up is Hydro-Man, Fluid Felon. What a cool card. For double blue, we get a 2/2 legendary elemental villain that says whenever we cast a blue spell, if Hydra Man is a creature, he gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it's not a counter, but it's just a nice bonus. And at the beginning of our end step, we untap Hydra Man, and until our next turn, he becomes a land and he can tap for blue. He's not a creature during that time. So if we had something that were to count our villains, which I don't believe that we do, but if we did, he wouldn't be a villain at that time because he loses the creature type, which means he loses the villain type, because this is a subtype of creatures. And nothing that isn't a creature can have a creature type unless, of course, it is a kindred card. All that to say, he's just a 2/2 that gets bigger when we cast blue spells on our turn, and every other turn, he's essentially an island without the island type. So if we need to pump our mana into something, if we want to cast an instant spell, Hydra Man is there for us. Next up, we have Merciless Enforcers. This is one of our sort of, henchman type villains. It is 1 and a black for a 2/1 human mercenary villain with lifelink. And 3 and a black, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. So I have a drain section that you'll see a little later. This is damage, not actual drain, but I've just sort of grouped them all together. Montana, Fancy Dan, and Ox. These are, I guess, some cool guys. It is worth noting that this creature dealing damage does work with lifelink. So if you have 3 opponents and you activate this ability, each opponent's going to take 1 damage and you're going to gain 3 life because 3 damage was dealt by a lifelinking creature. Just a nice supplemental villain. Next we have Metallic Mimic. Metallic Mimic is a shapeshifter, just like M.A. Boyd Changeling is, but it does not have the Changeling ability. So this is not a villain in our deck, in our graveyard, anywhere other than on the battlefield once it enters. Because for 2 generic mana, we get a 2/1 artifact creature shapeshifter. It is an artifact though, so Lady Octopus can put it in play. And it says, as this creature enters, choose a creature type. We will choose villain. This creature is the chosen type in addition to its other types, which means it will be a shapeshifter villain. But it's not that until it enters the battlefield and we have chosen the villain type. So worth recognizing. However, each other creature we control of the chosen type enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So that means when Metallic Mimic is in play, if we've chosen villain, all of our villains come in with a 1/1 counter on them. If we were to make a copy of Metallic Mimic and we'd chosen villain, when the copy enters, we also as the copy enters, we also choose a creature type. We choose villain again, so it will enter as a villain, and therefore the first Metallic Mimic will put a counter on it as it enters. So it's worth recognizing that the way this word as works, it's not a triggered ability. It's not like when this creature enters. This is happening in the process of it entering. So it's entering as a villain, it's just not a villain in any zone other than the battlefield. So if it says when a villain enters, Metallic Mimic will enter as a villain. Yeah. Next up is Morlun. Morlun, not really sure. This is a strange character. I did some research on what his deal is, and he's a weirdo. Morlun, Devourer of Spiders, is X black for a 2/1 legendary vampire villain with lifelink. So another 2/1 lifelink. However, it comes in with X 1/1 counters on it. So it can be kind of big. And when it enters, whatever X was, it deals that much damage to target opponent. And similarly to our friends, the Merciless Enforcers, Morlun, when it deals that damage to an opponent, we gain that much life because of lifelink. As opposed to those other villains, however, it's target opponent rather than each opponent. So Morlun is just sort of a big lifelinking villain dude, but gets bigger when Doc Ock is in play. Next is Mysterio's Phantasm. Don't worry, Mysterio himself is coming up. Mysterio's Phantasm is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 flying vigilant illusion villain. It says whenever this creature attacks, mill a card, which is to say we put the top card of our library into our graveyard. We have a few ways to get cards out of our graveyard. It's not really a big theme for us, but that little bit of mill can empower one specific card of ours, which is a different version of Doc Ock, that gets bigger if we have 8 cards in our graveyard. So Mysterio's Phantasm can help with that. But in any case, A 1/3 flying vigilance creature is not bad, but it's a villain, so if our commander's out, it's a 3/5 flying vigilance, which is great. Next, we have Adaptive Automaton. It's another one of these artifact creatures that is not a villain, it's a construct, but as it enters, we can choose a creature type and it will be that creature type. So similarly to the Metallic Mimic, Adaptive Automaton comes in. As it does, we choose villain as its type, and this 2/2 for 3 gives all of our creatures of that type +1/+1. So this stacks on top of the bonus that Doc Ock is giving everyone. So this would come in as a 2/2, because it is, and all of our villains are immediately +1/+1. This is not a counter, this is just a static bonus the same way that Doc Ock's ability is. We have one more of these guys, but it's a little different, because Bloodline Pretender is 3 mana for a 2/2 shapeshifter, still an artifact, but it has Changeling. We don't have to choose the type as it enters, it already is in every zone, every creature type, which includes villain. However, we do choose, as it enters, the villain type for its other ability, which is to say, whenever another creature we control with the chosen type enters, we put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So the opposite of Metallic Mimic. Rather than a 2 mana 2/1 that puts counters, or puts a counter on every other villain that comes in, Bloodline Pretender is a 3 mana 2/2 that gets a counter itself every time we have a villain enter. So similarly to the Flying Octobot, except it's not limited to doing it only once per turn. This is going to get pretty big pretty quick. Next, of course, we have to have Henchman for Doc Ock. 2 and a blue for a 2/1 human villain with flash, so it can trigger our villain entering abilities on our opponent's turns. Doc Ock's Henchman says whenever this creature attacks, it connives. Connive is a thing that happens a number of times in this deck. Connive means we loot, which is to say we draw a card and then we discard a card. It does not have to be the same card. And if the card we discard is not a land, we put a +1/+1 counter on Doc Ock's Henchman. So connive is really great. It's a good way for us to get some card selection. We don't end up with more advantage in terms of cards because we have the same number, but we get to take a card off the top of our library, put it in our hand, and then choose whichever card in our hand is not useful to us, or least useful to us, and just put it in the graveyard. What's especially nice about that is the Spider-Man set has a mechanic called Mayhem, which cares about cards being discarded. We only have 1 or 2 Mayhem cards in this deck, but there are more in the considering section, and of course in the Spider-Man set itself. I bet there's going to be even more when the Marvel Superheroes set comes out next year. So don't get ahead of yourself. But in any case, if we don't need a land, we can just go ahead and put it in the graveyard. But if we're able to put a non-land in the graveyard, then Doc Ock's Henchman will become a 3/2. And that's every time it attacks, it'll do this. I do want to make one mention about how connive works. If Doc Ock's Henchman attacks and this trigger goes on the stack, and then Doc Ock's Henchman is removed before it can connive, it still connives. The connive will still go through, which is to say we will still draw a card and discard a card, but because it's not there, we won't be putting any counters on it no matter what we discard. But we still get the loot even if we don't have the creature in play when the ability resolves. That's how connive works. Next we have Prowler, Clawed Thief. Shout out to the user who commented about Prowler in my Miles Morales video last week. This really is a cool card, but I think it works better in the 99 of this deck. Although you could definitely make a cool commander deck out of it. In any case, Prowler, Clawed Thief, is 1, a blue and a black, for a 2/3 legendary human rogue villain with Menace. So, Menace is good. Can't be blocked by just a single creature. Has to be multi-blocked. And whenever another villain you control enters, Prowler connives. So Prowler is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as we dump cards into our graveyard just from playing other villains. So that seems like a lot of fun. Next is Tombstone, Career Criminal. This guy's great. 2 and a black for a 2/2 legendary human villain that says when he enters, we return a villain from our graveyard to our hand. So maybe we had to connive away a villain in order to make Prowler get bigger. Now we just play Tombstone, you get that villain back, and villain spells you cast cost 1 generic mana less to cast. So Tombstone is just a Grey Ogre, a 3 mana 2/2, that gives us a discount on everything. In a way, Tombstone is doing a good impression of Honest Rutstein from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Honest Rutstein was a green and a black, and he discounted all of our creatures, and he returned just any creature card to our hand. So a little bit better, but more restrictive mana cost. And this one works perfectly for our villains. So yeah. Next is Beetle, Legacy Criminal. Beetle is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 legendary human rogue villain with flying. So 4 mana 3/3 flyer in mono blue sounds good to me. But Beetle is one of our renew creatures. For 1 and a blue, and exile Beetle from our graveyard, so we can only activate this while Beetle is in the graveyard. We put a 1/1 counter on a different creature we control, and it gets flying until end of turn, but we do this only as a sorcery. The idea of paying a cost and exiling the creature from a graveyard in order to get a benefit, but only as a sorcery, is something that happened a lot in the recent Tarkir Dragonstorm set, which was called the Renew mechanic, or it was an ability word, not a keyword, just an italicized term that kind of groups those abilities together. To make it simple, they didn't use that ability word here, but we have a couple of cards that do a similar thing to this, where we pay a cost, exile it from the graveyard, and get a benefit, but only as a sorcery. So I have tagged those as Renew cards, which you'll see. In any case, getting a villain that flies for 4 and is a 3/3, but is a 5/5 with our commander out, is pretty good. And then being able to give something else flying later on is very nice as well. Next, we have one of our clones. It's Chameleon, Master of Disguise. This is the only clone in the deck that is already a villain. So for 3 and a blue, we get a 2/3 legendary human shapeshifter villain that says we may have Chameleon enter as a copy of a creature we control, except his name is Chameleon, Master of Disguise. So if we do that, Chameleon will come in as that creature, and everything about that creature, except the creature's name, is Chameleon's new characteristics. Obviously, this is how you copy things. We're not copying and getting things like modifications to our card, like counters or auras or equipment, that sort of thing. But everything else that's printed on the card, whether or not that card has, been modified, or not modified, I should say, but has been altered by something like eaten by piranhas or witness protection, those auras that say this creature loses all abilities and it changes their power and toughness, those are not copyable values. It's just whatever's printed on the card. Chameleon will become the same as that, with the exception that Chameleon's name will be Chameleon, Master of Disguise. The reason that's great is because we can copy a legendary creature with this, and because the names are different, we have a second legendary creature that's exactly the same as the first, except for the names, so they don't legend rule and go away. We can copy our commander and have a second Doc Ock Master Planner, giving all of our creatures +4/+4 total. The other two abilities sort of overlap, but still pretty good, and now they can benefit from each other. Pretty nice card. And in addition, it has Mayhem for 2 and a blue, which means if we discard this card during the turn that we've discarded it, we can cast it for 2 and a blue. Timing rules still apply, which means this is a creature. We can only cast this at sorcery speed. But if we've discarded it earlier in our turn, and it's during one of our main phases, we can then cast it from the graveyard for just 2 and a blue. 2 and a blue for a clone that gets around the legend rule because it keeps its own name. Very nice. Next up is Graveshifter. Graveshifter is another changeling, 3 and a black for a 2/2 shapeshifter with changeling, so it is a villain in all zones. And when it enters, we may return target creature card from our graveyard to our hand. So we get to just raise dead a creature, put it back in our hand, we can cast it again. It doesn't even have to be a villain, but the Graveshifter is. So a nice 2/2 villain that sits on the battlefield and gives us a nice enters trigger, and then just helps out. With our commander in play, it's just a 4/4, but it's a 4/4 villain. Maybe that's helpful. Next up is Inner Demons Gangsters. For 3 and a black, we get a 3/4 human rogue villain, not legendary, that says if we discard a card as the cost of this ability, which means we can discard Chameleon, and now it has been discarded, or of course we can discard Chameleon to any of our connive triggers. If we activate this by discarding a card, it gets +1/+0 and gains menace until end of turn, but only as a sorcery. So maybe we have 8 cards in our hand because we have a great commander. Maybe our opponent only has 1 creature that's able to block. Maybe we discard our entire hand to give this +1/+0 8 times. It gets menace, it can't be blocked because they only have 1 blocker, and we hit for 11 damage. That seems pretty good, because then at the end of our turn, our commander's just going to have us draw back up to 8. Next up is Morbius. It's Morbin time. The Living Vampire is 2, a blue and a black for a 3/1 legendary vampire scientist villain. He's a scientist? He has flying, vigilance, and lifelink. So the kind of things that I would like to see, I wish he had a better toughness, but with our commander out he does because he's a 5/3. And he's one of our renew creatures. For a blue and a black and exile him from our graveyard once he's there, we can look at the top 3 cards of our library, put 1 in our hand, and the rest on the bottom of our library in any order. So Morbius, just a powerful flying attacker that gives us a little bit of card advantage after he dies. Next, I really wish Mysterio was more than blue, but it doesn't make sense for Mysterio to be more than blue. We need more villains so we can make a great Mysterio deck. But he's good in this deck too. Mysterio, Master of Illusion, is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 legendary human villain that says when he enters, make a 3/3 blue illusion villain creature token for each non-token villain you control, and exile those tokens when Mysterio leaves the battlefield. So if we have our commander and 4 other villains in play, we play Mysterio, that's a total of 6 villains in play, so we make 6 blue, 6 3/3 blue villains. Yeah, pretty sweet. We lose those when Mysterio leaves the battlefield, but that's all right with me. Next up, we have Scorpion, Seething Striker. Scorpion is 3 and a black for a 3/3 legendary Scorpion human villain with Death Touch. 3/3 Death Touch, not anything to sneeze at. And at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, target creature you control connives. So another chance for us to discard things. Not really going to be able to cast Chameleon with that because we're doing it during the end step. Can't really cast him then. But we are getting the same card selection we were getting with any other connive, and the fact that it is target creature conniving means it's not necessarily just Scorpion that's going to get possibly that +1/+1 counter. We can put it wherever we most need it. Next, Black Cat, Cunning Thief, such a cool card. 3 and double black for a 2/3 legendary human rogue villain that says when Black Cat enters, look at the top 9 cards of target opponent's library. Exile 2 of them face down, then put the rest on the bottom of their library in a random order. You may play the exiled cards for as long as they remain exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast the spells this way. So we look at the top 9 of opponent A's library, pick 2 of those cards, put them face down next to us, put the other 7 on the bottom of their library. They don't get to see any of these 9 cards. And then, whenever we want, we can cast those spells with our mana perfectly fixed. These spells do not require Black Cat to remain on the battlefield for us to cast them, because we may cast them for as long as they remain exiled. If they somehow get scooped out of exile, then we can't cast them anymore. But it doesn't say you may play the exiled cards for as long as you control Black Cat. So it is worth also noticing that it says cards and it says play rather than spells and cast. So we can exile lands from our opponent's 9 cards that we look at, and we can play those lands if we want to. That seems like it might be good. Maybe they've got great lands in their deck. I don't know. Maybe they're playing. Is Caracas banned in Commander? It probably is. Don't play with that guy then. But yeah, take their 2 best spells, or the 2 spells that are going to be best for you, and just hang on to him. Even if you lose Black Cat, if this ability resolves, you're going to get to do some cool stuff. Next up is one of our alternate Doc Ocs. Doc Ock, Sinister Scientist. 4 and a blue for a 4/5 legendary human scientist villain. With as long as there are 8 or more cards in your graveyard, Doc Ock has base power and toughness 8/8. So, 2 things to note. First is, we have a lot of ways to put cards in our graveyard. Discarding them, conniving to discard them. Yeah, there are ways for us to do this and to empower this Doc Ock. But that's the second thing I want to say. It says Doc Ock here. It's not referring to every card that is called Doc Ock or Dr. Octopus. It's referring simply to this card. Anytime in Magic that a card says its own name, you could replace it with the words this creature or this card. Technically, it's just this creature, but yeah, this card only gets a power and toughness of 8/8 if we meet this sort of super threshold requirement. So don't get excited. This does not pump up our commander. It just changes the 4/5 into an 8/8. However, as long as we control another villain, which we're going to, Doc Ock has hexproof. Again, it's only this creature, but a hexproof 8/8 is pretty great. We're going to be able to do a lot with that. Next, we have Venom Evil Unleashed. Venom is 4 and a black for a 4/5 legendary symbiote villain with Death Touch. And it's a renew creature. 2 and a black and exile it from our graveyard lets us put 2 1/1 counters on a creature, and it gains Death Touch until end of turn. Of course, only as a sorcery. So this is a nice 4/5 Death Toucher, another great attacker, a great blocker, and we can use it to pump up one of our other creatures once it has died, and give them Death Touch until end of turn. As I've said in some of my past videos, Death Touch is not evasion, but sometimes it kind of acts like it in Commander, because the option is to either take the damage, and then we just take damage, or lose our blocker or blockers. If you would choose to attack an opponent who has good creatures that they probably don't want to lose, I mean, they've got 40 life, they're likely to just take the damage, which is free damage, protects our creature from dying. It's like evasion. Yeah. Next, this is a non-Spider-Man card, but it's great in this deck. Titan of Lityara is 4 blue for a 6/6 illusion that says, much like those artifact creatures we saw earlier, as this creature enters, we choose a creature type, and it is the chosen type in addition to its other types. So Titan of Lityara is just an illusion everywhere other than the battlefield. But on the battlefield, if we've chosen villain, which we will, it's a villain. And whenever this creature enters or attacks, we may draw a card for each other creature we control that shares a creature type with it. And if we do, we discard a card. That means every time this enters or attacks, we draw a card for every villain we have, plus every illusion. If we happen to have some illusions that aren't villains, which I don't know that we will in this deck, but we could, then we get to draw a whole bunch of cards and also discard one, which may be Chameleon. So we might be able to cast Chameleon later. The fact that this works when this enters and when it attacks means a lot of card draw for us. Pretty good. Next up is another Venom. It's Eddie Brock. Venom Eddie Brock is 4 and double black for a 6/4 legendary symbiote villain with menace. And whenever another creature dies, put a 1/1 counter on Venom, and if that creature was a villain, draw a card. So usually, this is when our creatures die, we get a counter and we draw a card. But sometimes our opponents might be playing villains, or they might have changelings in play, which are themselves every creature type. But it doesn't say whenever another creature you control dies. So Venom is going to get these +1/+1 counters every time we kill an opponent's creature. Every time two of our opponents attack each other and their creatures die. This Venom is going to get quite large quite quickly and has menace. So blocking it is going to be nightmarish. Lots of fun. Especially if we have Vulture Scheming Scavenger in play. This is such a great card. 5 and a hybrid Dimir mana. So you can either play this for 5 and a blue or 5 and a black. You get a 4/6 legendary human villain Artificer with flying that says whenever Vulture attacks, other villains you control gain flying until end of turn. Imagine having Vulture and an enormous Venom in play, and you attack with Venom and Vulture, and Venom is this massive menace flyer that's just doing a huge amount of damage to you. Not to mention the fact that both of these are going to get pumped up by our commander and be an 8/6 and a 6/8, plus any of the counters that are on Venom. Vulture is just a great way for us to end games because some players just don't have the ability to deal with flyers. Finally, in our villain section, we have another Doc Ock, Evil Inventor, just classic. For the same cost as our commander, 5 a blue and a black, we get an 8/8 legendary human scientist villain that says at the beginning of combat on your turn, target non-creature artifact you control becomes an 8/8 robot villain artifact creature in addition to its other types. So that means if we have just some artifact of ours, as long as that artifact is not a creature, of which we have lots of non-creature artifacts, it's going to become an 8/8 robot villain creature. If it didn't enter this turn, if it entered on a prior turn, it doesn't have summoning sickness anymore, so we can attack with it. And it's a villain, which means our commander pumps it up and it becomes a 10/10 robot villain artifact creature. So can you imagine a treasure turning into 10/10 that attacks our opponents? And then every turn this happened, or every one of our turns, every one of our combats, this Doc Ock does that. This is an excellent card to represent as removal bait, which means they're not likely hitting our commander. Our commander gives us an enormous amount of card advantage, and that's probably enough for our opponents to try and kill him. But if we're just drawing a bunch of cards and putting creatures into play, our creatures that we're putting in play are often the ones that our opponents are going to target because they're scarier in the moment, like this Doc Ock, which, depending on your pod, it might help you protect your commander. So that covers our villains section. Let's take a look real quick at our clones. We have 4 cards that can clone other creatures that we have. We've already seen Chameleon and how he can, thanks to keeping his name, get around the legend rule. We have Copy Crook from Modern Horizons 3, 2 and double blue for a 0/0 shapeshifter rogue that says you may have this creature enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it has whenever this creature attacks, it connives. So obviously, if one of our opponents has an enormous, scary, terrifying creature, if they've got Galta, if they have, Sarah Emissary, something scary, we can have Copy Crook come in as that. But what we want to do is have it come in as one of our villains, particularly one of our non-legendary villains. If we do that, we get to have an extra villain that we get to play with and that gets pumped up by our commander. But we do have a few other creatures that might be good to copy with this, and that also gain synergy from us drawing cards. So being able to connive on the Copy Crook is really powerful, and otherwise it's just a clone, which is 4 mana blue spell, seems pretty good to me. Next we have Superior Spider-Man. Superior Spider-Man is not a villain. Superior Spider-Man is Dr. Octopus. This is when Dr. Octopus, I think, switches bodies with Peter Parker. Anyway, he's the Superior Spider-Man because that's what he thinks of himself as. This is 2 a blue and a black for a 4/4 legendary Spider-Human hero. He's a hero, not a villain. But he has the ability Mind Swap, which is we may have Superior Spider-Man enter as a copy of any creature in a graveyard, except his name is Superior Spider-Man, and he's a 4/4 Spider-Human hero in addition to his other types. And when we do, we exile that card. So Superior Spider-Man comes in, exiling a creature from our graveyard, and is a copy of that, except that he's a 4/4 and he's a Spider-Human hero in addition to his other types. So if we exile a villain from our graveyard, then Superior Spider-Man will be a 4/4 Spider-Human hero villain and have all the other text that's on that card. When we do that, we exile that card from our graveyard. So one of our creatures has died, but come back as Superior Spider-Man. The reason this is interesting and tricky is because we can say, what if one of our opponents kills our commander? We can let our commander go to the graveyard rather than putting it back in the command zone. Then we play Superior Spider-Man, and have Superior Spider-Man enter as a copy of our commander, and now we have a 4/4 version of our commander that is a Spider-Human hero scientist villain, and like I said, is a 4/4, but has our commander's abilities. And when we do, we exile our commander card from the graveyard. That is our commander card changing zones, and we could say, instead of it going to exile, we would rather it go back to the command zone at that point. Then we could recast it. Now we have two commanders, one of which is Dr. Octopus Master Planner, and one of which is Superior Spider-Man, but they're both doing the same thing. The only difference between them, besides their name, is the power and toughness and type line of Superior Spider-Man. But a 4/4 and a 4/8, pretty good, especially when the 4/8 makes the 4/4 a 6/6, and the 4/4 makes the 4/8 a 6/10. A little bit wacky, but we can definitely make this happen. And even if we don't use it to get a second version of our commander, we can sure get a lot of other good things out of it. The only thing we really want to look at is, unless this is coming in as something very powerful, we probably want it to come in as a villain, so we can get the benefit of our commander. So that's Superior Spider-Man. Finally, we have Imposter Syndrome. Imposter Syndrome is not a creature spell. It's a meme. For 4 and double blue, we get an enchantment that says, whenever a non-token creature you control deals combat damage to a player, create a token copy of it, except it isn't legendary. So this is one more way to get around the legend rule. If we can have this in play and have any of our villains, or creatures in general, hit a player, we make token copies of those things, and those things aren't legendary. They just lose the legendary super type. So if our commander hits one of our opponents, we get a second copy of our commander, both of which are giving the same bonuses to all of our villains and to one another, because it says other villains you control get +2/+2. So Imposter Syndrome is excellent in this deck. It is one of our more expensive cards, but our deck is relatively inexpensive for what we normally spend to build these decks. So we have one more section I want us to look at for our game plan, which overlaps a lot with what we've seen so far. We are a Typal deck, so I have a lot of cards that are tagged as Typal cards. These are cards that help us based on the fact that we are playing villains. So for example, Amoeboid Changeling can make creatures into villains. We like that. Flying Octobot triggers whenever we play villains. Metallic Mimic lets our villains come in with extra 1/1 counters on them. Pax Disdain is maybe not the best removal spell we can use, but it was so flavorful when we're talking about a big group of villains. Why stop at 6? So this is an instant from Morningtide. For 1 and a black, it says choose a creature type. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each permanent of the chosen type you control. So if we say target your commander, choose villain, your commander gets -10/-10 because we have 10 villains in play. That's not unreasonable or unexpected or unlikely, really, in this deck. Pax Disdain is really nice in that way because it also gets around indestructible, because a creature that has 0 or less toughness gets put in the graveyard whether or not it's indestructible. So a nice little bonus with that. Adaptive Automaton, we've already seen. It gives an Anthem effect to all of our villains, the same as our commander does, except it's a +1/+1 rather than +2/+2. Arcane Adaptation. Like I mentioned, we have a number of creatures that are villains, either as their card or on the battlefield. But if you'll notice, we have 22 actual villain typed cards, and our shapeshifters, we have 6 or so. One of those is also a villain, which is Chameleon. So we have 27 of our 36 creatures that are actually villain typed. So we have Arcane Adaptation to take care of the other ones, or to take care of any other creatures we may happen to get. Maybe Black Cat puts creature spells into exile that we can cast from our opponent's deck, and we want them to get the benefit of our commander, so Arcane Adaptation's here to give it to them. 2 and a blue for an enchantment that says, as this enchantment enters, choose a creature type. Creatures you control are the chosen type, in addition to their other types. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. So this means that, for example, our Adaptive Automaton, or our Metallic Mimic, let's talk about Metallic Mimic. If we have Arcane Adaptation in play, Metallic Mimic is a villain, assuming we've named villain with Arcane Adaptation, while it's in our hand, while it's in our graveyard, while it's in our library. every one of our cards that is a creature, in every zone we can imagine it, is a villain if with Arcane Adaptation out, if we've chosen villain for it. That means Metallic Mimic, when it comes in, will already be a villain. Now we still have to choose a villain choose villain as a type rather, for this effect to put counters on them, and it will say it says each other creature, so that doesn't mean it comes in and puts a counter on itself, but worth noticing. Yeah, Arcane Adaptation is a nice way for us to get those benefits on all of our creatures, not just the ones that we get that are already typed as villains or have Changeling. We've seen Bloodline Pretender. It puts counters on itself when we have villains come in. Herald's Horn is next. For 3 generic mana, we get an artifact that says, as it enters, choose a creature type. I know you've seen this before. Creature spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. So this is another tombstone for us. It just discounts all of our villains. But also, it gives us an upkeep trigger. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card of the chosen type, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. So this is sometimes drawing us an extra card. Like I mentioned, we have 22 cards that are typed as villains, but we have several cards, like Bloodline Pretender, that have Changeling. Changelings are every creature type in every zone, which means if Herald's Horn is in play, during our upkeep, we can look at the top card of our library. Maybe it's a Bloodline Pretender. Bloodline Pretender is every creature type, so it's definitely a villain. So we get to reveal it and put it in our hand. If Arcane Adaptation is in play, the Herald's Horn trigger is going to let us look at the top card of our library, and we say, do we see a creature? If we do, we can reveal it and put it into our hand, because all of our creatures will be the same type that we've named with Herald's Horn, which of course will be villain. Next up, we have Patchwork Banner. This is a manalith for us. It's 3 generic mana for an artifact that we can tap to add 1 mana of any color, but as it enters, we choose a creature type, we will choose villain, and it gives all of our creatures of that type +1/+1. So it's the same thing that Adaptive Automaton is doing, but rather than being a 2/2 creature, it's a manalith. It's a rock that taps for mana of any color we need, which is great because our curve is a little, I wouldn't say it's low, but we have a lot of cheap cost spells in our deck, which means that casting a lot of spells, which we will often do because we have large hands that we draw up to at the end of every turn with our commander in play, we're going to be casting a lot of spells. We're going to be doing 2 and 3 spell turns. So Patchwork Banner, giving us extra mana that's colored, is going to be helpful to us. Prowler is in the Typal section because it connives whenever another villain we control enters. The Spots Portal is an instant. It's a removal spell. 2 and a black for this instant that says put target creature on the bottom of its owner's library. You lose 2 life unless you control a villain. So this gets an extra benefit if we control a villain, and we're probably going to. Even if we don't, we can lose 2 life to send a creature to the bottom of its owner's library. That's so bad. It's not in the graveyard, it's not exiled, it's not, O-ringed, it's not bounced. This is great. Yeah, very excited about this kind of effect. I do want to make mention that if you hit an opponent's commander with this, like I was saying before, with your commander going to the graveyard or to exile, if you would tuck your commander into your library, you can instead, as a replacement effect, have it go to the command zone. So putting your opponent's commander on the bottom of their library using the Spots Portal is probably going to just end up putting their commander in their command zone, but that's still pretty good removal. Maskwood Nexus is another version of Arcane Adaptation, but even better, because it's colorless, as it is a 4 generic mana artifact, but it's just does not ask us to name a type. It just says creatures you control are every creature type. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. Essentially, this grants Changeling, or the effect of the Changeling keyword, to every creature we have in our deck. Or creature card, creature spell, creature permanent, all of them. In addition, with Maskwood Nexus in play, we can pay 3 generic mana and tap it to make a 2/2 blue shapeshifter creature token that does have Changeling. So it's already going to be a villain for us. This is making all of our creature spells, cards, and permanents into villains, but this just makes us a 2/2 villain, essentially. That means if Maskwood Nexus goes away, this creature, this 2/2 shapeshifter, is going to be a villain even with Maskwood Nexus no longer on the battlefield because it has Changeling. So a nice way for us to pump out tokens, for us to use our mana if we have extra mana to use, to round out our villain total. Yeah, and that's in addition to this even better ability. There's one other card, the blue Leyline from Duskmourn, that is in the considering section that also does this. I wanted to lower my curve a little bit, so I put Arcane Adaptation in rather than the Leyline, but the Leyline is like $4 cheaper, so maybe a good option if you're willing to spend an extra blue pip to do that. And you get the Leyline benefit of maybe having it on the battlefield during turn 0. Something worth looking at in the considering section. Next up is Mysterio. We've already seen Mysterio and how he makes a whole bunch of villains for each villain we control that isn't a token. This Doc Ock gets hexproof if we have another villain. We next have Vanquisher's Banner. Vanquisher's Banner is 5 generic mana for an artifact that says when it enters, we choose a creature type. All of our creatures that type get +1/+1. So this is already Patchwork Banner, but for 2 more, and it doesn't even tap for mana. But what it does is whenever we cast a creature spell that is a villain, we draw a card. So this gives us an awful lot of card advantage, which we don't generally probably even need because we have Doc Ock drawing up to 8 cards for us at the end of every one of our turns. But being able to power out creatures and cast them in the most mana efficient way, rather spells, yeah, this is going to be able to help us do that, and that's better than just expecting to draw a bunch of cards during your end step, because maybe our opponents kill our commander. Vanquisher's Banner is going to be there to give us repeatable card draw in addition, plus the Anthem effect. Venom's Hunger is another removal spell. It is 4 and a black for a sorcery that destroys a creature and gains us 2 life, but it costs 2 less if we control a villain. So 2 and a black, kill a creature, gain 2 life. That's pretty good. And again, it benefits from us having villains, from us being villain Typal. We've seen Titan of Liara. It gives us card draw for all the villains we control. We've seen this Venom, who gets counters every time every time any creature dies, and we draw cards if those creatures were villains, or for each of those creatures that was a villain. Vulture lets our villains fly, and this other Doc Ock can make our non-token artifacts into villains. So that is our Typal section. We've covered all of the spells that I consider a core of our game plan. We're going to talk about these support sections now, starting with card advantage. I've used the word draw here. That doesn't mean necessarily that all of the cards in this section draw us cards, although many do. This is just a shorthand for card advantage that I do when I build my decks to make it faster. As we know, Lady Octopus can put cards into play for us from our hand without us having to pay any mana for them, which is technically a kind of ramp, but it gives us the advantage of being able to play cards without using any of our mana resources for it. So a little bit of card advantage. Baleful Strix is next, a classic for any blue-black deck. This is a 1/1 artifact creature bird, so it is an artifact, so Lady Octopus could play it, or could put it into play for us if we didn't want to spend the blue and a black. It is a 1/1 flying death touch bird that says when it enters, draw a card. So it just replaces itself. It's a great blocker. It's a solid flyer. It's an amazing Nilsham art. This Baleful Strix can't speak highly enough of it. Mind Stone is next. This is really more of a ramp piece. It's a 2 mana rock. 2 mana for an artifact that taps for 1 colorless mana, but we can also pay 1 and tap it and sack it to draw a card. So later in the game, if we no longer need the mana that it's giving us, we might as well just draw an extra card off of it. It is worth noting that a lot of these cards in this section either offer us like one-time or repeated card advantage, but they're not always the strongest draw spells, and that's because we're expecting our commander to fill in the gaps. If our commander draws us 3 cards, each turn for 2 turns in a row, how many draw spells was that worth? How many draw spells do we have to run, or how many cards do we have to draw off of our commander for it to be worth some of the draw slots in our deck? And yet we're still running 11 cards that count. Herald's Horn is next. This is another, it's the type of one that we saw earlier. It discounts our villains, and it lets us look at the top card of our library, and if we see a villain creature card, then we can reveal it and put it in our hand. That's a bonus to our draw step. Morbius, of course. If we do the renewal ability, pay a blue and a black and exile it from our graveyard, we can look at the top 3 and put one in our hand, the rest of the bottom of our library. So that's a card. The Sad Robot is next. Solemn Simulacrum is 4 generic mana for an artifact creature, Golem, so Lady Octopus can put this into play. It's an artifact. It's a 2/2 that says when it enters, we Rampant Growth. We search our library for a basic, put it into the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. And when it dies, we can draw a card. So this is a creature that if it dies, we draw. Maybe we cast one of our spells that brings a creature back to our hand or to the battlefield. We get to Rampant Growth again. It dies again. We draw a card. Seems good. We've seen Black Cat, and it gives us card advantage from our opponent's library. Vanquisher's Banner lets us draw cards whenever we cast villains. And next is Great Intelligence's Plan from the Doctor Who decks. I felt like this name alone should go in the Dr. Octopus deck, because this is exactly how he sees himself. For 4, a blue and a black, we have a sorcery that lets us draw 3 cards. And then, target opponent, who we get to choose, faces a villainous choice. So perfect for a villains deck. They either discard 3 cards, or we may cast a spell from our hand without paying its mana cost. So we can cast something for free, and remember, we've just drawn 3 cards. So if we drew up to 8 at the end of our last turn, and this is the first card we've cast, we've drawn up to 8, we've drawn for our draw step, we're at 9, we cast Great Intelligence's Plan, we're at 8, we draw 3 cards, we're at 11, and then our opponent either has to discard 3 cards, or we get to cast for free one of our 11 cards, one of our 11 spells, or 11 cards in our hand. One of those spells we can cast for free. Normally, if an opponent has a whole bunch of cards in hand, maybe they've just drawn a whole bunch, they might choose to discard 3 lands. That's not as exciting for us. Having spent 6 mana to make them put 3 lands in their graveyard that they weren't really going to get to necessarily anyway. But if an opponent has 2 cards in hand, they still discard 3, which is to say as many as they can, up to 3. And if it looks like they've been holding on to them, yeah, they probably are trying to build towards something that they really want to play, and that's exactly the right time to do it. That's us using our own Great Intelligence's Plan to figure out what needs to go, which opponent we need to hit with this. I know Great Intelligence is a character in Doctor Who, but you see where I'm going. It's also a way to look at this as a political tool, because we can say, I don't want to hit you with this opponent A, I want to hit opponent B with it, but it seems like you would be a better target, so I'm probably going to target you. However, I don't have to. What will you give me to not target you with this? I know some might call that blackmail, but I'm Dr. Octopus. I would never be so villainous as that. I'm just making someone face a villainous choice. What if you just leave me alone so we can pursue our own greatness for the next turn, maybe 2 turns, 3 turns, let's say. It's 3 cards after all. Isn't that worth it to you? Yeah, we use this to sort of ham it up, and that seems like a lot of fun at the table. Even if someone doesn't take our deal, we still draw 3 cards and maybe get to play something for free. Sounds good. We've seen the Titan of Lityara and how it draws us a bunch of cards whenever it enters or attacks based on us having a lot of villains. And then we've seen Eddie Brock, which draws us cards whenever a villain dies. Draws us a card whenever a villain dies. So that is our card advantage section. Let's talk now about our acceleration section. Again, I just use the word ramp to represent that this is the acceleration section. It's just a shorthand. Soul Ring. I'm sure you know this card. Soul Ring costs 1, taps for 2. It's a mana rock. It's the best mana rock. It's the symbol of the format. Put it in your deck. Wayfarer's Bauble also costs 1, but rather than tapping for mana, it's an artifact that if we pay 2, tap, and sacrifice it, we get 2 Rampant Growth. Search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So this is a great way for us to fill in whatever gaps we may have in our colors for the mana that we're able to produce. If it looks like we need a second blue source, we might want to go looking for an island with this. It's pretty great to do so. Arcane Signet, of course, just like the Soul Ring, we want to have this. For 2 generic mana, it's a rock that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, which is to say it's a 2 mana rock that taps for black or blue. Sounds great. Another 2 mana rock is Dimir Signet. It is also 2, like I said, but it doesn't tap for any mana on its own. You have to put 1 mana into it. But as long as you put any type of mana into it, you can tap it and add both a blue and a black. So if you're tapping, a land and Demir's Signet, you've tapped 2 mana sources and gotten 2 mana. So it's not like it's ramping you specifically on its own, just the fact that it exists is the ramp. But you're not getting more out of it than the permanents you're tapping. It's just filtering. It's just worth noticing that if you have the Demir's Signet in play, you want to use this mana if you're able to, because if you tap all of your other mana sources and you have Demir's Signet untapped, well, then you can't activate it because it requires mana to activate. As opposed to, I'll come back to the Mind Stone, the Talisman of Dominance. It's another 2 mana rock that can tap for colorless on its own. Don't need to put anything into it. Or it could tap for blue or black, but if you have it produce colored mana, it will deal 1 damage to you. Usually, that's worth it. The way that talismans play out is you tap them for their colorless ability whenever you need mana, and if you're just desperate for colored mana, which may happen a couple of times in the game, it deals 1 damage to you. 1 damage is absolutely worth it if you need to really fix your mana, especially since you can tap it for colorless mana in addition. We've seen Mind Stone already. 2 mana rock, taps for colorless. Thought Vessel is another 2 mana rock that taps for colorless, but it also gives us no maximum hand size. This is a great ability. It's worth answering the question though. You have no maximum hand size. That means we don't have a maximum hand size. Makes sense, right? But what about our commander? Our commander says our maximum hand size is 8. So what if we have both in play? Which is it? Well, the answer is whichever one came in most recently. This is following the layers rules. It's in timestamp order. If Dr. Octopus Master Planner comes into play, he will change our normal maximum hand size to 8. If we then play Thought Vessel will take away our maximum hand size. Done. But if it happens the opposite way, we normally have a hand size of 7, Thought Vessel gives us no maximum hand size, and then Dr. Octopus comes into play and changes it again, it's now a maximum hand size of 8. So it's whichever one entered play most recently. That's what we go with when it comes to what changes our hand size. And if you need to check on this, if you're not sure, we have a reliquary tower in our land section, which we will get to near the end of the video, which in its rulings specifically says this very thing. So in case you don't believe me, I will prove it soon. We've seen the Herald's Horn. It ramps in the sense that it discounts all of our villains. Patchwork Banner is a manalith. It taps for 1 mana of any color. Tombstone discounts our villains the same way that Herald's Horn does. And Solemn Simulacrum enters the battlefield and we get to Rampant Growth, so that's land ramp. So that is our acceleration. Let's take a look at our interaction, which again I've just sort of shorthanded as removal. We're playing Infernal Grasp. Infernal Grasp is such a good, sort of generically good removal spell. I don't typically like to run these or go for the throat or, the Doom Blades essentially. But it fits so well for this deck, and there weren't a lot of better, power level appropriate removal spells that were as efficient as this. So I say, let's go with it. For 1 and a black, it's an instant that just says destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. Done. Just kill something that's worth 2 life to you. Sounds good. Pax Disdain, as we've seen, gives a creature -1/-1 for each villain we control. Scorpion Sting, we haven't seen. For 1 and a black, it gives a creature -3/-3 until end of turn. Just an instant. Just kill something that's not super big, but it sure kills it dead. And we can use this in combat in a different way. Maybe our 4/4 creature is attacking and they block with a 6/6. We can Scorpion Sting the 6/6 into a 3/3. Now it's a 3/3 and it dies to our 4/4. Or maybe our opponent has something that says when this creature dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. Well, if its power is reduced by 3, then that is the number that it uses in the calculation when that thing dies. So worth recognizing that Scorpion Sting giving -3/-3 is pretty powerful for this kind of effect. And again, flavorful for these villains. Spider-Man No More is next. I really like this kind of effect. This is 1 and a blue for an aura. It's an enchantment that you put on one of your opponent's creatures. Enchants a creature, And it says enchanted creature is a citizen with base power and toughness 1/1. It has defender and loses all other abilities. Defender means it cannot attack. So we take our opponent's commander, let's say, and make it a 1/1 with defender, loses all other abilities. If we're attacking in a way that they can't block, like maybe we're attacking with Vulture and our creatures have flying, or with one of the Venoms and we have Menace and they only have the one blocker, then it just has to sit there not doing what it was meant to do, being a 1/1 defender. But we can also hit one of our opponent's non-commander creatures with this, and that's still pretty great. And again, flavorful. Next up is the Spots Portal. We've seen this already. It's 2 and a black. We put a creature on the bottom of its owner's library and we lose 2 life unless we control a villain. Next up is Withering Torment. This is also 2 and a black. It destroys a creature or an enchantment. So this can hit enchantments in black. It's one of the only I think two black spells that can do this. And it costs us 2 life, but it's at instant speed. So for an extra mana, on top of Infernal Grasp, it can also hit enchantments. Seems good. Next, from the actual Spider-Man set, the Eternal version of it, we have Lethal Protection. It's 3 and a black for a sorcery that says, destroy target creature, and return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So it's killing a creature at sorcery speed, and it's letting us raise dead one of our creatures, which is easy for us to get things into the graveyard because we're doing so much conniving earlier on. Pretty fun. This is how it ends. This is so strong. As an instant, 3 and a black, we have target creature's opponent, or target creature's owner rather, shuffle that creature into their library. And then they even, on top of that, face a villainous choice. They either lose 5 life, or they shuffle another creature they own into their library. Now, this creature, if they choose the second one, that opponent gets to choose which creature they're shuffling in. The first one, we are choosing. So if our opponent has, let's say, 2 or 3 really good creatures and no other creatures, we take the best one, target it with this is how it ends, and it's just gone, shuffled into their library. Then they either have to lose 5 life or lose one of their other creatures, and it's up to them. So this is the villainy that we want to see at the table. We've seen Venom's Hunger. Venom's Hunger gains us life when it destroys a creature, and it only probably costs us, again, 2 and a black. And then we have Lorthos the Tidemaker. This is not the typical kind of removal, but it's pretty good. Lorthos is 5 and triple blue for an 8/8 legendary octopus. It's an octopus in our Dr. Octopus deck. And it says whenever Lorthos attacks, you may pay 8 generic mana. I know that's a lot, but if you do, tap up to 8 target permanents, and those permanents don't untap during their controller's next untap steps. This is 8 permanents. It may be that one of our opponents doesn't have more than 8 creatures. So we swing with all of our creatures, including Lorthos. We pay 8, we tap down all of their creatures, and they won't untap during their next untap step. If we haven't killed them, probably our other opponents will by the time those creatures untap. But it's also worth recognizing, Lorthos says up to 8 target permanents. Doesn't say creatures. It doesn't even say non-land permanents. We can tap one of our opponent's lands and make them down 8 mana for the next turn cycle and more. That's disgusting. And being able to do that can slow someone down so much that we might be able to make a deal with a different opponent and say, hey, I'm going to slow down opponent B if you, opponent A, help me out here. We might say even, we can attack opponent B and then tap permanents of opponents A and C. We can spread this around. It's such a powerful effect. It is expensive, don't get me wrong, but it's so good and it can just kill people or completely change the way the game plays out. In addition, it's also true that there is a printing of this that is just Dr. Octopus. I didn't want to put this on the front so that it wouldn't be, it's just kind of hard to read. So I would rather see Lorthos as itself, and it's also cheaper that way. But yeah, Either way you want to play it in your deck, Lorthos is an excellent include. And so flavorful. It's an 8/8 Octopus for 8. And if you pay 8, come on, it's a theme. Finally, we have one Wrath in this deck. It's Villainous Wrath. I don't know that this is the best Wrath for this deck, but it sure is a Wrath that actually has Dr. Octopus in it and the word villainous in the name. In our Villains deck, what can you ask for more than that? 3 and double black for a sorcery that says target opponent loses life equal to the number of creatures they control, then destroy all creatures. Not ideal for us because we want our creatures, but sometimes you just need to reset the board. That's why I'm only running one of these. And if we have an opponent that makes us want to cast this, it's probably an opponent that has at least as many creatures as us, which may mean, in our creatures deck, that they have so many that having them lose life equal to the number of creatures they control is going to be worth it as a sort of insult to injury, or maybe even it kills them late game. Maybe they've got 15 creatures protecting them, but they only have 8 life left. This is going to make them lose 15 life. Villainous Wrath is a nice include in this deck, if only for flavor reasons, but I don't think it is just only for them. So that covers our support sections. We're going to talk now about a few sections that supplement our game plan. Starting with another flavorful card, Doc Ock's Tentacles. This is an equipment for a single generic mana that says whenever a creature you control with mana value 5 or greater enters, you may attach this equipment to it. There are quite a few creatures in this deck that are mana value 5 or greater, including our commander. So if this is in play when our commander comes in, it will automatically snap on and attach to our commander if we want it to, because it is a May. All it does is give +4/+4, which is a total of 8, let's remember. That would make our commander from a 4/8 into an 8/12, so we've kind of missed the boat either way. And it does equip for 5 generic mana, which is a lot. But we can put that on something small if we really want to. And if that small creature then dies, this just falls off. Maybe we play a big creature and it snaps on. Seems all right. I still wish that Doc Ock's Tentacles gave +4/+0, so we could put it on our commander, making him into an 8/8, and then gave him some kind of protection ability, like if you control 8 villains, or if this creature has a ward cost of, an amount of X, where X is the number of villains you control, or other villains you control, something like that. Anyway, would have been nice to be a little more synergistic, but not a bad card. I kept it in here. If you are making changes to this deck, I recommend this is an excellent card to cut and replace with something like Lightning Greaves or Swiftfoot Boots as a way to keep your expensive commander protected. Just worth thinking about. We've seen the Flying Octobot. It pumps itself up every time a villain enters on our side. It gets a counter. Metallic Mimic makes sure that our villains come in and get a counter on them. Adaptive Automaton is an anthem effect for our villains. Bloodline Pretender pumps itself up every time we have a villain come in, same as Flying Octobot, but not just once per turn. Doc Ock's Henchman, whenever it attacks, it connives, so it might get a counter. Patchwork Banner is another anthem effect, just like Adaptive Automaton and like our commander, but just +1/+1 versus our commander's +1/2/+2. Prowler, again, connives whenever our villains enter. Beetle can be renewed, exiled from the graveyard to put a counter on something, and gets flying until end of turn. Copy Crook can connive whenever or connives when it attacks. Inner Demon's Gangsters pumps up temporarily in that it gets a +1/+0 and menace whenever we discard a card to its ability. Scorpion, again, connives, or has a creature connive at our end step if we had a creature die. Doc Ock's Sinister Scientist, if we have 8 or more cards in our graveyard, it's an 8/8, so that's a pump from its normal 4/5 power and toughness. Vanquisher's Banner, another anthem, gives all of our villains +1/+1. Venom Evil Unleashed has another renew ability, putting 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature and giving it Death Touch when we exile it from our graveyard to its ability. Venom Eddie Brock puts a counter on, or we put a counter on it every time any creature anyone controls dies, ever. And if it was a villain, we also draw cards. And finally, Doc Ock Evil Inventor makes our non-creature artifacts into 8/8 robot villains, which is not really pumping them up, because they didn't have a power and toughness before, but if you think of that as a 0/0, then it is a pump. So yeah, close enough. Next up is our tokens section. This is a section that makes tokens and cares about tokens. We've seen several different ways we can make those tokens into villains if they aren't already villains. So we're going to start with Nadir Kraken from Theros Beyond Death originally. Nadir Kraken is 1 and double blue for a 2/3 Kraken that says whenever you draw a card, you may pay a single generic mana. And if you do, put a 1/1 counter on the Kraken and make a 1/1 blue tentacle creature token. I put this in the deck because not only are we drawing a bunch of cards every turn, not just during our draw step, but at the end of turn when our commander has us draw up to 8, every one of those draws triggers the Kraken. So if we have any mana left over, 2 mana left over, we can pay this trigger twice, put a counter for each of those times on the Kraken, and make tentacles. Why wouldn't we want more tentacles in our Dr. Octopus deck? Next we have Homunculus Horde. In here for a similar reason actually. 3 and a blue for a 2/2 Homunculus that says whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a token that's a copy of this creature. So let's say we have Homunculus Horde in play, and we have our commander in play, or we've gone into our turn, we've drawn our card for our draw step, and then we play our commander. At the end of turn, assuming we don't have 8 cards in hand, we'll draw up to 8, which will be the first one of those we draw is our second card, which will make a copy of the Homunculus Horde. We now have 2 of them. Next turn, the same thing happens. We draw during our draw step, we go to our end step, we draw up to 8 if we've gotten down from it, which we probably have, and both the original Homunculus Horde and the token copy trigger, and we now have 4 Homunculus Hordes. It increases like a Scoot Swarm, like a Scoot Swarm. I'm going to say that twice just because it is so dangerous. And in blue, an exponential increase that only happens once per turn. But that's enough. Just that's enough. Homunculus Horde can really get out of hand. And I know that they're all 2/2s. But if we have something in play that's making them into villains, they're 4/4s with our commander. And just an ever-increasing army of 1/1s from the Scoot Swarm we have probably all encountered is enough to know that that's terrifying. Maskwood Nexus, of course, can make us tokens that are 2/2 blue shapeshifters with Changeling, and is one of the things that can make our Homunculus Horde and our Nadir Kraken's tentacles into villains and pump them up. Mysterio makes a bunch of illusion villain creature tokens equal to the number of non-token villains we have, including himself, whenever he enters. And of course, Imposter Syndrome makes non-legendary copies of our non-token creatures once they deal combat damage to a player. So those are our tokens. Let's take a look at our drain section. Again, not all I mentioned earlier in the video, not all of these cards drain our opponents. For example, Merciless Enforcers and Morlun actually do damage, but they're in the same section just so we don't need to have 2 sections for direct damage, or burn if you want to call it. This is how it ends. Of course, can make an opponent lose 5 life if they choose to in their villainous choice. Villainous Wrath can make an opponent lose life equal to the number of creatures they control before we wipe the board. But then we have Psychosis Crawler, which is one of our best win cons for the deck. Psychosis Crawler is 5 generic mana for an artifact creature Phyrexian Horror. Psychosis Crawler, not a villain, it has power and toughness each equal to the number of cards in our hand. And whenever we draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So a lot of the time, at the end, during our opponent's turns, Psychosis Crawler is going to be an 8/8 because we drew up to 8 at the end of our turn. And then every time we draw up to 8, maybe we had 5 cards in hand, we go to our end step, our commander has us draw up to 8, that's us drawing 3 cards, so each opponent's going to lose 3 life. Every time we draw and draw and draw, Psychosis Crawler is going to drain all of our opponents, and it gets more and more filthy. The reason I wanted to note Psychosis Crawler especially is because we have multiple cards in this deck that can make copies of things. Imposter Syndrome can make Psychosis Crawler copies that are just non-legendary copies of it, which is, it's not legendary anyway. But we have things like Chameleon. Chameleon can come in and be a Psychosis Crawler. Yeah, it's not a villain, but it's definitely doing double time drain for our card draw that our commander's given us. Copy Crook, whenever it attacks, it connives, which is to say we're drawing a card, which will trigger itself if it's a copy of Psychosis Crawler. We've already talked about Imposter Syndrome, but I want to mention Superior Spider-Man briefly. Superior Spider-Man, if we were to have Psychosis Crawler in our graveyard, we can make a copy of it with Superior Spider-Man in the sense that Superior Spider-Man comes in as a copy of it. But remember, he's a 4/4 spider-human hero in addition to his other types. Psychosis Crawler has a power and toughness, each equal to the number of cards in our hand. This is an ability that Superior Spider-Man would have, but it says that it's a 4/4. So what is it? Is it a 4/4, or does it have the ability that sets its power and toughness? And is it a star with power and toughness equal to the number of cards in our hand? For this, we do what we always do. We go to the rules. Here's the comprehensive rules on copying objects, and here's the relevant text. If a copy effect specifies a change to the copy, then that wins. That part is not the part that would have otherwise defined the characteristic is not copied. So that means with the Psychosis Crawler, even though it has this ability that says its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards we have in our hand, Superior Spider-Man says, that's cool and all, but this creature is a 4/4. Because this is making a copy and it says the word accept here, everything in the clause that starts with accept is true and overrides anything that would have been true about the card that it's copying. So if we were to make Superior Spider-Man into a Psychosis Crawler copy, it will be a legendary artifact creature, spider-human hero, Phyrexian horror. It will be a 4/4. It will be named Superior Spider-Man, and it will have the Psychosis Crawler ability of whenever we draw a card, each opponent loses a life. So that was a little bit of a deep dive, but worth recognizing for the kind of things that we're doing when we copy things. You know, we need to be able to see how we can make these things work together. So making copies of Psychosis Crawler is great in this deck because it helps us out a lot, even though it is itself not a villain. Yeah, nice little bonuses there. So that's our drain section. Let's take a look at our discard section. These are things that can help us with any kind of mayhem we want to use. Again, we really only have Chameleon as our mayhem card in this deck, but in the considering section, there are several other cards that have mayhem, and I know there's more in the set. So if you are making changes, discard cards may be relevant to you. Doc Ock's Henchman, Connives, drawing and discarding. Prowler Connives, drawing and discarding. Copy Crook, same thing. Inner Demons Gangsters has an activated ability that requires you to discard a card. Scorpion has a creature Connive, and Titan of Lityara has us draw a bunch of cards and then discard a card. So all of these are discard outlets for us if we need to, even if you're just copying this deck directly, or playing this deck directly, I should say. It's not really copying it, it's yours to use. Feel free. If you are discarding Chameleon, these are several ways to do so. Next, we have a Recursion section. Recursion are cards that will give us ways to bring cards back from the graveyard somehow. For example, Tombstone. When it enters, it returns a villain from our graveyard to our hand. Graveshifter returns any creature card from our graveyard to our hand. Lethal Protection, again, any creature card targeted in our graveyard comes back to our hand. Superior Spider-Man doesn't bring anything back. In fact, he gets something out of our graveyard, but before he does, he makes himself a copy of it that is also a 4/4 spider-human hero named Superior Spider-Man. So it's not us recurring the same thing, but we're getting a similar thing back, so it counts. Finally, I had to put this card in the deck. It's Behold the Sinister Six. There's another card called Prison Break that I wanted to bring in that I thought was pretty cool, but this is just so thematic for the deck, you have to do it. And it's the only way to feature all of these guys on the same card, because Kraven is green and black, Electro is mono red. Like, there's nothing that can, there's no non-white but all four other colors villainous card in this set that can lead the Sinister Six, you know? Even Green Goblin, the Norman Osborn card that is a Grixis card if you flip it over, can't handle Kraven because Kraven's green. So anyway, speaking of Kraven, you should check my channel next week to see what I've done with him. In any case, Behold the Sinister Six is 6 and a black for a sorcery, so pretty expensive. But it says return up to 6 target creature cards with different names from your graveyard to the battlefield. So if your graveyard has gotten kind of full or busy, maybe you just did a Villainous Wrath and wiped the whole board, Behold the Sinister Six is a great way to get all your creatures back, or at least 6 of them. So yeah, it's a reverse hex, if you will. Open your eyes to your nightmare, Spider-Man, Dr. Octopus, Otto Octavius. Just in case you weren't sure who Dr. Octopus was. All right, that is our recursion section. Let's talk about those renew cards. We've already seen all of them, but it's worth going over the fact that they are all typed this way. Like I mentioned, all of them require us to pay a cost and exile it from our graveyard to get something out of that. Morbius is not at sorcery speed, but Beetle and Venom are. So worth recognizing that both of these are really more like Renew because they're at sorcery speed and they put counters, or a counter, on a creature and confer an ability until end of turn. Morbius just gives us some card advantage and we can do it at instant speed. So maybe that's why he's uncommon and these are commons. But yeah, just worth remembering that these are cards that are still useful once they are in our graveyard. We have a protection section, but it's not going to show up here because the cards that I've tagged as protection are all in the considering section. Didn't have room for them. So maybe you want to put those in, like we mentioned, the Swiftfoot Boots and the Lightning Greaves, anything that can keep our commander on the battlefield so that we don't lose him and lose out on that 7 mana we spent to cast him. Finally, we have a flavor section. I've tagged every card in this deck that's here, not just for reasons of being good in the deck, but also because it's good flavor. Doc Ock needs his tentacles. Doc Ock makes flying Octobots. He has henchmen. The Nadir Kraken gives us more tentacles. Superior Spider-Man is Doc Ock. And obviously Doc Ock is Doc Ock. This is his Villainous Wrath. You fool, you thought you had won. He has a great intelligence and he's our master planner. He leads, I guess. He founded and made the plans for the Sinister Six. Again, it's Doc Ock. And then this, like I mentioned, Lorthos, there is a printing of him that is Dr. Octopus, but he's a giant octopus. Costs 8, is 8, an 8/8. You pay 8 to do a thing, to tap down 8 things. That's a lot. It's 8s, you know. That's the only reason he calls himself an octopus, because he's got 8 limbs. So that is all of our deck's spells. We're going to go now, as we always do, over our land base. We're running 21 basics in this deck. Pretty even split between islands and swamps. Slightly more black, but we're doing fine with running this many basics. And I want to mention that we have a lot of basics, not just because it works for us and it keeps our budget low, but because I mentioned about our pip intensivity. How pip intensive our deck is, not because we have so many cards that have a lot of pips like Lorthos does, but because we have the ability to cast so many cards on our turn because we have such a huge hand all the time, and we have a lot of low-cost cards that we're going to need to make sure we have plenty of untapped sources of colored mana. So that's what our basic lands do for us. We're running Dimir Aqueduct. This is a bounce land. I love the bounce lands in Commander. This is a land that enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters, we have to bounce a land back to its owner's hand. So one of our lands is going to go back to our hand. So if we play this first, it's the thing that has to come back to it. It's going to have to return itself. However, it taps for 2 mana. This is a land that taps for a blue and a black, not one or the other. So if we sequence this properly, we can have this out relatively early, and because it's bouncing a land, that means we have a land in our hand for the next turn, so we can hit our land drop. We maybe now have fewer lands in play than we have had turns, but the same amount of mana production as our turns. So bounce lands are great in Commander. We're running an awful lot of basics. 21% of our library is basic lands, so a check land, Drowned Catacombs, or Catacomb, is great. This comes in tapped unless we control an island or a swamp. And if we do, which we probably will, it's going to come in as an untapped dual land. That's excellent. If you want to upgrade this, you could probably put in a Shipwreck Marsh. It is the slow land from, I think, Midnight Hunt or Crimson Vow, one of the two, that comes in tapped unless it's the third land or later that you have in play. So more likely to come in untapped maybe, than Drowned Catacomb, but they're pretty close, and this one's a lot cheaper. We're running Darkwater Catacombs. It's a filter land. It is exactly the same as Dimir's Signet, but on a land. We pay 1 and tap it to add 2 mana. So again, you're having to tap 2 mana sources, and you make 2 mana out of it, as opposed to Dimir Aqueduct, which you tap 1 mana source and get 2 mana. So you're not having like an inherent ramp here, but it does fix your mana, and fixing our colors is really important, like I mentioned, for the pip intensivity. If you wanted to upgrade this to a traditional duel, or not a traditional duel, like a shock land, like Watery Grave, or it would specifically be Watery Grave, then that would also be great. We are running 7 fixing lands. These are cards that provide us mana in different ways, but are meant to be here to ensure that we have the right color of mana that we want. Command Tower is the same as Arcane Signet, but on a land. It comes in untapped, taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. We want that. We also want Path of Ancestry, because it's a slower, but otherwise better command tower. It comes in tapped, which is a big deal, of course, but then it taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, and when we use that mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. Doc Ock, of course, shares a color with himself. So every time we use Path of Ancestry's mana to cast our commander, we get to scry when we do. In addition, we have 25 other creatures in this deck that are either humans, scientists, or of course, villains. So 26 of the cards in our deck, when we cast them with Path of Ancestry, we get a scry from. That's a very high rate, totally worth putting in, even if it's just a tapped command tower. We are running Temple of the False God. I know some people don't like this card. I think it's great for the kind of decks that I build. It taps for 2 mana, 2 colorless mana. Comes in untapped. We just can't activate it at all unless we control 4 other lands, so 5 or more lands, including itself. So this is a soul ring that you can't use early in the game, which is totally fine. A soul land is super powerful, even if you can't use it to ramp into big things early on. Still very valuable later in the game. And then we have 4 soft fetches. Vibrant Cityscape is just Terramorphic Expanse or Evolving Wilds. You tap it and sacrifice it to search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. That's just Rampant Growth, but on a land. We have Obscura Storefront and Maestro's Theater, which are in this deck the same thing as each other, and they're almost the same as Vibrant Cityscape. When they enter, they automatically sacrifice themselves. And then we look for an island or a swamp, put it on the battlefield tapped, shuffle, and we gain a life. You gain the life because you don't have the ability to hold this up and wait and sacrifice it whenever you want to get a shuffle. You have to do it right when this comes in and sacrifices itself. But otherwise, these are 3 cards that go and fetch us one of our basics. And the Obscura Storefront and Maestro's Theater give us a life for our trouble. The only difference between these cards is Obscura Storefront can also find plains, and Maestro's Theater can also find mountains, but we don't have either of those land types in our deck, and because they don't have the colored pips listed, they just have the names of those other lands here, it still fits into our commander's color identity. So we can use these as a nice way to get lands out of our library, because we play the Maestro's Theater, then it sacrifices itself and we find another land. So we've taken 2 lands out of our library when we've only been able to use the 1 as our land drop. It's a little bit of deck thinning. It's a tiny little bit. Doesn't really make that much difference, but it's nice when we're drawing so many cards and we want to hit gas as much as we can. Finally, we have Myriad Landscape, a card that I put in very many decks. It does enter tapped, but it taps for colorless. We can also pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it to search our library for 2 basic land cards that share a land type, and then put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So it's a double Rampant Growth. It just has to be 2 islands or 2 swamps. So while this comes in tapped, and it does cost us 2 mana in addition to tapping and sacrificing it, this is us turning 1 land into 2 basics. So it is ramp on a land. It just is a little bit slow ramp. So if Temple of the False God is slow and good, so is Myriad Landscape. We can upgrade if we wanted to. In this section, maybe Vibrant Cityscape or one of the New Capenna sack lands could become a Fabled Passage, which is just Vibrant Cityscape, but it finds the basic, brings it in tapped, and then untaps it if we have 3 other lands. So that might be nice. we are running Underground River. It's a pain land. It's the same thing as our talisman that we saw earlier. It comes in untapped. It taps for colorless, or we can tap it for blue or black if we're willing to take a damage from it. So just like I mentioned earlier, we usually just use this for the colorless, and if we're desperate for the colored pips, it's worth the 1 damage. I love the pathways, so we're running Clearwater Pathway. It's a modal double-faced card. We can play it either as the Clearwater Pathway, where it comes in, untapped, taps for blue, or we can play the backside. It's the Murkwater Pathway, comes in, untapped, taps for black. Pretty good either way, whatever we need. We're also running Scryland. It's Temple of Deceit. It comes in tapped, but once it's untapped, it taps for blue or black, and when it enters, we scry one. So a free scry for our tap land, not terrible at all. If we wanted to upgrade this to the Undercity Sewers Surveil land, that would also be nice. Give us a little bit more card selection and put things in our graveyard if we wanted to, but it's totally fine this way. Finally, we have 4 utility lands. I like to run Demolition Field in my decks. I think that it is fair in most commander pods that mass land disruption is frowned upon, but having targeted land destruction, just one instance of it, is a good idea, because sometimes people are running lands that are dangerous or difficult. People run Glacial Chasm or a Rogue's Passage, something that can really mess up your day or really empower their game plan in a way that is hard to interact with because it's a land. So we run 1 Demolition Field. It's an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap and sack it, to destroy a non-basic that our opponent controls. They then get to search their library for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped and shuffle. And then, so do we. So this is even better than a Rampant Growth, because it comes in untapped. And what's nice is, we've lost our land and we've destroyed their land, but neither of us is down any lands, because we both have a basic in play to replace it, and those come in untapped. The only way we wouldn't get that is if they or we don't have any basics remaining in our library, which I'm not going to say is only the result of a greedy mana base, but if that's the case, then, they recognize the risks when they're building their deck. We are running Reliquary Tower, of course. It comes in untapped, taps for colorless, and it gives us no maximum hand size. And as promised, the ruling is, if multiple effects modify your hand size, apply them in timestamp order. If you have something that makes your maximum hand size 2 on the battlefield already, and then you put Reliquary Tower on the battlefield, you'll have no maximum hand size, but if it's the other way around, your maximum hand size would be 2. Just go with timestamp order, and even with our commander's ability giving us a maximum hand size of 8, that's still a lot of cards, especially since we're drawing up to it. Reliquary Tower just lets us draw up to 8 and not have to worry if we want to cast draw spells on top of that. Rogue's Passage is in here because it is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it to make a creature unblockable. We have a lot of nice anthems running around with our villains, so we're going to have some big villains, and sometimes it's worth spending 4 mana and tapping Rogue's Passage to get in with a big dingus and just slam into our opponent and do enough damage to make them have a worse day, or even just kill them. We may be even able to say, like, oh, I can kill you with my Rogue's Passage. What if I don't? What will you give me for that? Or we can, if we really wanted to, it doesn't say target creature we control. So we can say, hey, I can't kill player B or opponent B, but you can if I make your commander unblockable. If I do that, will you leave me alone for the next turn or 2 or whatever? That's a good deal, that I've certainly seen, change the texture of a commander pod, because of course you make that deal with them and you say, all right, I'm entertaining your offer. You turn to opponent B and you're like, what are you going to give me to not do this? Lots of fun. Villainy. Finally, we're running Sinister Hideout, which is really more of a fixing land. It comes in tapped, and it taps for blue or black, but I've put it in this deck and in the utility section because we can pay 4 and tap it to surveil 1, which is a tiny little bit of card selection. We probably don't need this for that, but who knows? Maybe it will be mid to late game, our commander has been removed, and we have a lot of mana sitting around and not enough cards in hand to do much with. Surveilling might help us get where we need to go with it. Sinister Hideout is mostly in this deck, however, because that's Doc Ock right there. This is from the Spider-Man set, and it's got the Master Planner right here on the card. So I'm glad that that is the card we get to end on, because that sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new Spider-Man Commander decks every Thursday through mid-November when the Avatar set drops. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or deck style. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe, and remember, Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.